Jake Julius built his Rattlesnake TV YouTube channel from 0 to just under 1 million subscribers in about a 2-year span, breaking down the heated political, cultural, and religious debates of our time. We talk about his journey from a rough childhood as a young man who didn't conform well in school, didn't know what to do with his life, and was a liberal atheist, as he describes, into a man focused, inspired, and all in doing the work that God made him to do. We talk about the impact that Jordan Peterson has had on both of us, and we talk about the tribalism that is taking place among conservatives, including the Daily Wire, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, and Andrew Wilson. We talk about the importance of remaining in truth and what that even means nowadays. And finally, we talk about what young men should look for in a wife. I hope that you enjoy this great conversation with Jake Julius. For my audience who maybe doesn't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are?
Yeah, sure, man. So my name is Jake. I've got a channel called Rattlesnake TV and a podcast called The Reality Based Podcast. And I've got a travel channel where we do some videos all around the world. We've just released a video where we went shooting in Michigan with Andrew Wilson, which was a lot of fun. And we've got another project coming out called Not One Step Back, where me and Andrew will be doing a political commentary show, which will be interesting.
Okay. So I've been following your Rattlesnake TV. I mean, really from my early days on YouTube. I was just telling you back when I maybe had a couple thousand subscribers. I found your channel, and I kind of saw how you created your videos and kind of modeled them. And to be honest with you, I took a lot of kind of how you structure your videos and put those into my own. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you got started, why you got started with Rattlesnake TV, and really what you're trying to do with your content.
Yeah, cool, man. I've seen some of your videos and you're doing a good job, so that's good to know.
Thank you.
I started it, well, actually, I was working in a corporate job for a little while. And before that, I was doing personal training, and I've always been a little bit like all over the place. I was one of those 27-year-olds who really didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. And I was sort of jumping from thing to thing every few years, and things were getting a little bit nervous as you're getting towards 30. You're a bit like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And then I really hated the corporate job I was in, like hated it beyond belief, actually. And I was sort of just looking around because I was really never good at school. I went to like 4 different high schools. And I was never really good with authority and sitting in one place for a while, maybe a few mental issues, undiagnosed, not really too sure. But when I went to the corporate job, I was just looking at the wall every day, like, I can't do this. I can't be told when to go to the toilet and everything. So eventually I just sort of quit because I thought to myself, I just can't really do this anymore. It's just not for me. And I went and actually lived with my mum for a few months. And this is the first time I've lived with my mum since I was 15. So I was like, Mum, I'm going to come home for a bit and collect my thoughts, collect myself, and just see what I want to do next. And she was pretty happy to have me home for a little bit. And then I started the YouTube thing. And mind you, I'd been doing YouTube for years and years, though. I'd done a podcast about fighting. I'd done a podcast about boxing. I'd done a podcast about, what else had I done? About Australian rules football, that's right. So for years, I'd been doing YouTube and podcasting and this sort of thing, but just never got any traction. But then I wanted to put a little bit more effort into it. And just, I guess by a bit of a stroke of luck, I did this Russell Brand video, which was him debating these MSNBC anchors on Morning Joe. And it just got some traction, man. I woke up one morning and it had 6,000 views. And I went into my mum's room and I was like, Mum, check this out. 6,000 views. I'll be out of your hair soon. And then, yeah. But then it just kept going up, man. Within like a week, it had like 1 million views. And I got my first paycheck. And I thought to myself, all right, this is what I'm going to be doing 12 hours a day, 7 days a week from now on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. I actually, when I went back and looked at your channel, because what I've done is, in trying to build up my own channel, I go back and look at early videos that other creators have done, and then you can kind of see like the first bunch like don't get a lot of views, but then there's normally like 1 or 2 videos that starts to put that individual on the map. I'm gonna make a confession to you. So I saw that Russell Brand video that you did. I saw that it was just like an outlier number of views. I'm embarrassed to say this, but whatever. This might be helpful to other people, but like I actually went back, found that same Russell Brand video and like piggybacked off it to get some views and stuff for my channel. I'm not gonna like if you go back and look at that commentary I did on that Russell Brand video, because the reason I did that is you did it a while ago, but Russell Brand has really been he's kind of vaulted himself into the commentary world and in a big way. And he's, you know, been trending a lot. He's been in the news a lot. I had done some other videos on Russell Brand with Jordan Peterson and them talking about Christianity and just kind of, you know, kind of creative ideas, you know, around Christianity like those two like to do. But what you could see in that video, which I thought was really interesting, because I got it from your channel and I went back and watched it, you kind of see Russell Brand change in that moment of like him being a celebrity and then just MSNBC just pissing him off enough to where he was like, you can see it in his eyes almost. And he was just like, I'm going to take all of you down. And like, and it was almost like in that moment, I thought that was cool to see. So that's why I did commentary on it. But I knew just from looking at your channel that that video had got a ton of views. So, you know, it's just interesting that,
well, I stole it from Charisma on Command. Have you ever seen the Charisma on Command?
No, I haven't seen that. No.
Yeah. If you look at my commentary, like it's almost daylight robbery. It's almost thievery. I took a lot of the thing because I was obsessed with that channel for a while. Such a good channel, and they do a lot of body language breakdowns. So I took actually a few of the exact things that they said. So whatever you're getting charged with in this situation, I'm getting charged with double.
Well, one of the things I also took from your channel and I was like, I need to do this early on, is that you have kind of the debate theme, which I like, and that you're delivering that value to people of like, hey, you're breaking down like kind of the technical aspects of debate and like look at how he handled himself in this situation and whatever. And I think a lot of people can take away from that, because like early on I was like, well, how come my videos aren't getting as many views, or how come it's not sticking or whatever? And it's just like I didn't have that type of value add that you were kind of bringing to the table. So I mean, props to you for that. But I mean, long story short, I've learned a lot from obviously your content and your channel. So I appreciate you for that.
Well, it's not easy though, man. I don't mind anyone who wants to sort of look at my formula and do something similar, but you'd know it takes a lot of work. It's much easier to sort of put the video on and stop it every 10 seconds and say something arbitrary. But if you actually want to look at it and create a narrative structure throughout the video and to make sure that everybody walks away at the end of the video saying that like they learned something or they had a good laugh or something like that. Otherwise, I just don't post it. If I don't think I can really add value, I won't post about it. So, but it's not easy though, man. It takes a lot of work. And, you know, I'm happy for people to try and do it. But, you know, as you would know, it takes a lot of work to actually build traction. And then if you have a few outlier videos, that's one thing. But if you're really consistent and you build up a base of people who tend to watch every video, that's where the gold is, where you can actually create a community.
Yeah, that's good advice. I want to go back to kind of where you were as you were talking. You said you were a 27-year-old who didn't know what to do with his life. And it sounds like you had been kind of touching around and feeling on YouTube a little bit. I just think there's probably a lot of people that are in that circumstance. Like they're in a job or they're in some type of career that they can't stand or don't like. I mean, kind of touch on that a little bit. Like you obviously had the courage to make the decision to get out of that corporate job. I mean, I've got, you know, buddies who they have families, they're married. I don't know what your personal situation is. Like I said at the outset, like we're still getting to know each other, but I would say you're probably miserable in your job because you're doing something that you were not made to do. And I feel like, you know, I'm a religious guy. I'm a, you know, strong Christian. Obviously, like the cross is in the background of every video that I do. Truly believe that God made each and every one of us for some specific contribution and thing to this world. And if you're not doing that thing, then you're going to feel the angst of not doing that thing, right? Like if you're a fish out of water, you're obviously going to be, you know, miserable, in a word. You had the courage to make the decision to pursue it. And obviously, I think you would say that it was probably, you know, one of the best decisions that you've ever made, changing the course of your life. For individuals that have that responsibility, you know, I think that you don't have to, you know, just up and leave your job if you have a family to support and whatever, but it's, of my opinion, that still doesn't give you the right to compromise on what you were made to do. And you should still carve out a section of your day and your time to be working on that thing to build it up.
Yeah, for sure, man. I was a big Joe Rogan fan for a number of years before I ever started. And one of the things I always gleaned from him was that, something quite similar. Obviously, not in the religious sense with Joe, but he would talk about passion and doing whatever you're interested in, however you can really bring value to the world, because that's where I do think that purpose comes from. If you actually really think that you're bringing value to the world, and a lot of people who work in an office or work in construction or something like that will absolutely feel that way, and because they are bringing a lot of value to the world. If you're working for a job and if you're earning a good honest crust, then absolutely. But maybe it's because I took a few too many head knocks in boxing or something like that. But I always just never could stick to anything and was always just super duper restless. Like I said, I went to 4 different high schools, got kicked out. I was from quite a troubled background, from the wrong side of the tracks in Australia, and grew up in gangs and a liberal atheist degenerate my whole life pretty much. So if you had told me that I would have the values that I've got now as a man when I was younger, I would have laughed in your face probably. But yeah, so for me, it was always just about being really super restless and anxious and not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. So quite not an ideal situation. But I like what you say about the fact that God has a purpose for all of us and something that we're put on earth to do. And if we don't feel like we're moving in that sort of direction, then there is that sort of angst. I really relate to that a lot. So I think that a lot of, like my dad, for example, worked in the same accounting job for like until he had it. He had a heart attack when I was 14 and then was really sick for a few years. But anyway, it's a different story. But until he got sick, he worked in the same job and he got up every day and he was absolutely thrilled to do it because he could provide for his family. A lot of people, that is their purpose, to be a provider, and the means in which they do that doesn't necessarily matter that much. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think that I've got some sort of like a delusional thing maybe about me a little bit, where I started getting really into politics and a few years before my YouTube channel. And I always saw myself moving in that direction in terms of podcasting, but I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. And then once I started to do the YouTube thing and started to interact with that world a little bit, I thought, yep, this is exactly where I want to be and what I want to do. And I've just managed to have the work ethic and the drive to just go in that one singular direction. It's actually a kind of funny story, because at that time when I was living with my mum for that brief period of time, Jordan Peterson was coming to town, and I booked it months and months in advance to go and see Jordan Peterson in Brisbane. And just before it, like the week before, you know how they say that married men live longer because they've got a woman around? Yeah. Yeah. So I was, like I said, I was living at my mum's place, and I got really sick randomly, and I just was in bed all day. I couldn't get out of bed. I had these really, really terrible headaches. And my mum came into my room and she was like, "You should probably go to the hospital." And I was like, no, get out. I'm just a little bit sick. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. And then she comes in the next day and she goes, and I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. And every time I tried to stand up, I'd nearly collapse. And she goes, "Get up, we're going to the hospital." And I reluctantly went. Turns out I had meningitis. So I was like, it could have killed me. And so I was in hospital for a few days getting all these antibiotics and everything. And I thought I was going to miss the Jordan Peterson concert or tour, whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. But I just made it by the skin of my teeth. I was a little bit sick, but I made it to Jordan Peterson. And then I was in the car and I was feeling really sort of like dejected and like, don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. And my older brother said to me, "Jake, I reckon Jordan Peterson's going to say something to you tonight that changes your life," just randomly. Not even a very sentimental guy. And then I got to the talk, and his talk for the night was, when Jordan Peterson talks, he takes one rule from his book and then he elaborates on it, right? Yeah. So the rule from his book that he was talking about was, think about who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that. And it's just like he spoke to me the whole night for the next few hours, just almost like he spoke directly to me. So I don't know. I feel like I've had a lot of different fortuitous things that have happened that have led me to where I am now, but I never stopped trying, if you know what I mean. Like all the podcasts that I did failed and everything, but then I just sort of kept chipping away at it and kept slowly mastering it until I could finally get to a place where I felt like I had enough of a grasp on it to take it further. So if anybody's out there and they've got a passion or something that they would love to monetize and would love to make their thing, just chip away at it and just slowly master it and slowly realize, do different projects, try, fail, until eventually you can sort of get into a rhythm, get the wheels turning and just aim single-mindedly at that.
What you just said about Jordan Peterson really, really resonates with me also. Like, to be honest with you, like I was kind of tearing up as you were describing that story because and I'm also really glad you mentioned that there are individuals that have work and do their jobs and provide for their families, and they're good with that. And that's awesome. Like, I'm that's great for them. But there are individuals, and I would put myself in that category. It sounds like you are too, and that there is some type of like, I don't know, creative pull or some type of like passion that does pull on you. And a little bit about my story and background. I was I was an athlete pretty much all the way up through college. I played college baseball. That consumed a lot of my life throughout my younger years. I graduated just thinking that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to start my own business. I didn't want to, I kind of had an internship at a government contracting firm. I'm from Northern Virginia, so there's a lot of government contracting firms around here. My dad's an aerospace engineer, so that was kind of his world. And he got me plugged in for an internship just through college, just to have some work and to get some experience. But I realized while I was doing that work that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I kind of just had that kind of creative, like, go my own way type of itch. I make the joke all the time. I'm legitimately unemployable. Like, I'd be a terrible employee. I can't do it.
Same.
So, along the lines of you, maybe something happened to me in my childhood that caused this type of dysfunction. I don't know, but that's not true, because I think that there are a lot of people that are wired that way as well.
Yep. There's a lot of people who are
case,
happy to be like a right-hand man or an entrepreneur or somebody who's happy to be behind camera and who's happy to be the number two or the number three, because you can still like really forge an amazing path doing that.
Yeah, and we're all made differently, and that's kind of like the beauty of humanity, right? Like, each one of us are made for different things, and obviously, like, I have what I'm good at and what I'm kind of pulled to, but I also need those people on the back end who can who can do the operations and are more detail oriented and all that good stuff. Like, it's actually really cool how we're all made differently. But what I ended up doing is, the first business I got into was franchising quick service restaurants. Fast forward through that, we eventually sold them right around the COVID timeframe, got out of that business. That's where I started the real estate and design build business that I have now. Like, I basically have a small business that I have and that I continue to operate on a daily basis with about 5 people on my team, and that's good. It's a good business. It provides it's great. But to get back to that Jordan Peterson point, like, I've always had something in me that's like, I want to put myself out there. I want to create. I want to, fight for the truth. I want to fight for the church. The work that I want to do, I want it to be singularly focused in doing it for God and building up the church and standing for the truth. And I've felt called to write and create and put stuff out there. And that's always been a call that's been just in me and on my heart, even as I was building these other businesses. Like I told this to my wife, I was like, as I started to, publish this content, she was like, why are you doing this? Like, we have like, you have a business that provides for our family. I'm home with the kids. Like, what are you doing? And I was just like, I don't want to be remembered as the top local real estate agent or the top, remodeling contractor, right? That's just not the path I see for my life. So in any case, had just continued to have that call. And it was actually what pushed me over the edge finally was a Jordan Peterson clip from his 2017, I think it was Melbourne, Australia, 12 Rules for Life tour. And he I have the clip and I have it on my channel because it means so much to me, and I watch it again and again and again to motivate myself. But it was something along the lines of most of us are operating at 50% in our life. And then he asked, like, what if you were all in? Like, what if you just dedicated yourself finally to something and you just went all in? And imagine if you were 95% in, 97% in, or all in. And it was just in that moment that it was crazy. Like, it was literally like, I listened to that speech, and at the end of it, I was just like, I am doing this. Like, and that's when I started to pursue it. And then I started from, I don't know if you know who Alex Hormozy is. I follow a lot of his, business stuff and entrepreneur stuff. It was along that same time frame that I was also introduced to kind of the revenue model on YouTube, to where it was like, oh, you can produce on social media, and if you're good, they'll pay you. And that was important for me because like you have other platforms like Instagram or whatever where you put stuff out there, but you're not rewarded monetarily for the stuff that you produce. So once I figured out the revenue model of YouTube, I was like, okay, now I have a way where if I can do it and I can be good at it, then revenue can actually come in and I can actually justify doing this like for my wife and my kids, which I am responsible for providing for. So, but in any case, like, yeah, I mean, I I love Jordan Peterson. I owe him a lot, and it's not just from like kind of inspiring me and pushing me onto this path, but I also just the I grew up Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church, went to Catholic school for my entire life, and just the way that he has like kind of reflects on Christianity and his Exodus series, his Genesis and the Gospel series, like kind of everything that he's done just has really I mean he's done so much for my faith as well, and yeah, he's been really incredible that way.
Oh
My
yeah,
my one
yeah,
of my ultimate goals is to be able to talk to him. I think that would be really cool. So
yeah. Same here, man. I've been covering him pretty much the whole time throughout my channel, and yeah, he's actually been an internet father for me, which is
yeah.
fantastic. I mean, I lost my dad when I was young. When I was 19, he passed away, so I was completely lost after that. I mean, when I was 14, he got really sick, and when I was 19, he passed away. But my whole teenage years was basically a blur. As soon as my dad went out of the picture as the strong sort of role model that he was, because he's an incredible guy, that's when it started to go all downhill for me. And I had about at least 10 years or so where I was just off the rails.
Mm.
So discovering Jordan Peterson was what grabbed me from that place and like gave me direction. And even if it wasn't a solid direction at the time, it was still like, you can do something, you're worth something. So that was unbelievably important for me. And I used to listen to him over and over and over and over again, even when I was, like a liberal. And this is sort of what brought me out of that time of having that sort of perverse worldview, which I think it is kind of perverse. But yeah, it was really really important for me to have Jordan Peterson and to just listen to what he was saying, and it was quite like empowering. And I do really think that all men yearn for like male role models and for father figures, and if you don't have one, then you'll look for it somewhere. And I was looking for it beforehand in things like gangs and just like weird friendship groups and partying and all of this sort of thing. But then when I discovered Jordan Peterson, he gave me a whole new, fresh perspective. And I felt like I had that sort of personal relationship with him, which was weird. But it was a parasocial relationship, obviously, but it felt, personal, like he sort of knew me and he understood me.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a weird thing to say when you really think about it from someone who you see on the internet, but it did feel that way because there aren't really many men who have looked at the plight of young men these days and the sort of restlessness and the lost nature that a lot of young guys have, and can really talk to you in that way. So yeah, it was unbelievably important. And I've gone and seen him twice now live, and I'm going to his conference in a few weeks in London, the ARC conference, and I'm hoping to be able to corner him and chew his ear off at some point, but we'll see.
Yeah, the first art conference I thought was awesome. There was a lot of good that came from that. I mean, it just goes back to I think just the general theme of Jordan Peterson in general. I mean, what he's been able to do. I mean, especially with just being that type of inspiring figure that so many modern young men need. I mean, and then with what he's doing now, kind of now that he's much bigger, with what he's doing to the art conference and just being that kind of larger political figure. I mean, he truly is changing the world, and it's inspiring to see. And I personally like, he's just someone also too, just because of everything that he's done, especially everything that he's done for me. I think you could also attest to this too. It's like you have so many world leaders that you just can't trust. You know what I mean? Like that none of them are out to like make anybody else's lives better than their own, right? We see this in the United States, so many with all of these politicians that none of us can trust anymore. So it's like we're in a moment where we finally have these individuals that we can just like rely on and trust. And I feel like there's a lot of men who resonate with that. Like, especially, Donald Trump has become one of those people Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, kind of this that you know that this whole group of these guys that you know they've inspired so many men, and now they're in positions where you know they can lead the world, and it makes I don't know it makes us feel it makes me feel safer. I don't know, it makes me truly feel like the world is getting on the right track with these individuals that are finally having this type of influence.
Oh yeah, I'd say so for sure. I mean, how long have we just been bombarded with these sort of fake creatures who are just
Yeah.
completely unrelatable and who have all of, like, for example, the presidents beforehand, they're not like relatable people. You couldn't feel like you could have a beer with any of them without them turning into a lizard or something. So now it's Donald Trump is this guy who you genuinely feel like you could go and have a game in 9 holes with, or
Hmm.
just he doesn't drink but have a beer with. You get what I mean though.
Yeah.
And guys like Elon Musk, he's this sort of Twitter troll, and that's kind of relatable, just saying funny things on Twitter all the time. And Rogan is just seems like a regular guy, and that's what I think men will gravitate to and relate to is the kind of guy who you feel like you could just hang out with. And there's just so much fakeness, especially if you look at politics and mainstream media. These people aren't real, and you know that they'd be totally different in their personal lives than they are on screen. But I think we're in an age now where authenticity is everything, where authenticity wins. If people are
Hmm.
truly authentic and if they're relatable and if you feel like you can gravitate towards them and they can build a community around them, then that's going to win.
Yeah, and you see that, and you're also forgiven a little bit more, like even for when you are authentic. Like so, for someone like Donald Trump, like obviously he's rough around the edges, he's brash, but like when it's truly who you are, I feel like people are generally, you know, they're at least what we've found, especially as Donald Trump has continued to just grow more and more popular. It's like, oh, actually, what people really like about him is he's just real, and he'll tell
Mm.
anybody what he thinks, right? And I feel like that has just been that's been, you know, it's been refreshing because it's real. It's like common sense. It's reality, right? And that's what we want. We've just seen so much just bravado and just fronts of just, you know, like you said, like fake lizard people, and that really
Yeah.
is the best way to describe it. But um I want to go back to something that you had said when you were talking about your personal story, because you were talking about how you know you were on the other side of the tracks. You had kind of a rough upbringing. You kind of you mentioned being more of a liberal, and then you went through, I don't know, maybe it was a 10-year period. You had mentioned what what were those things? I mean, you mentioned Jordan Peterson having an impact on you. What were what were those things that kind of I want you to speak specifically more maybe towards your faith, and then how maybe that shaped your current views now. But like you said, you mentioned you were an atheist. So kind of what happened to you that ultimately like maybe won you back as far as like Christian faith goes?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the first school that I went to was a Catholic school in terms of my high school, but it was just sort of you say the prayers and you don't really take it seriously or
Yeah.
anything. It's just something that you do, I guess. And then after that, I went to different schools that weren't religious, and I guess I would have watched a lot of Christopher Hitchens clips back in the day on YouTube of him making fun of priests and everything, and
Mhm.
I was really influenced by that. And then when I got into my teenage years, in my early 20s and late teens, I was pretty like reasonably intelligent, but completely uninformed about anything. And I would always be one of those like Reddit atheists who would make fun of Christians. I worked at the Salvation Army for 2 years as well in my early 20s at a homeless shelter, and they were all very staunch Christians. And I would always make fun of them and always press them and say, "You believe in this and this. You believe in a sky daddy. You believe in, like, how can you believe in that sort of stuff?" And
Mhm.
this guy Matty, who I used to work with, is just the nicest dude ever. Just such a nice guy. I would always make fun of him and like press him, but in a friendly banter sort of way. And he would just sit there, listen to my claims, and then sort of refute them. But he couldn't really refute them in a logical way. I kind of look back on that now, and I'm thinking if he worked on his apologetics a little bit, maybe he could have got me earlier.
Mhm.
But um, that was basically who I was, and I was living a very sort of lustful and very, let's say, hedonistic life, going out to the club all the time and just chasing girls and doing all sorts of bad things that we can't name. Um, all kinds of party things,
Mhm.
that I can't tell you as customs about. But yeah, so you can imagine. And then when I started to get into politics and culture a little bit more, it was Jordan Peterson was really the first one. It was like Rogan to Peterson arc.
Mhm.
Rogan, but Rogan's like the atheist, obviously, so that never really changed my sort of metaphysical perspectives very much.
Mhm.
And then Peterson as well. And then the thing that really interested me about what Peterson was saying was when he would talk about stories, when he would talk about Disney movies, and when he would talk about all of these sorts of things, and how there are all of these archetypes that exist, and how these unconscious archetypes really resonate with us on an unconscious, deeper level. So I became really interested in those ideas and started reading a little bit of Jung and all of that. And then I started to get into more of this commentary and watch debates and everything. And then I always just found that the conservatives had much better arguments because I don't really read very well. I can't really sit there and read books like normal people, I guess, or like smart people. So I tend to watch debates as a way of learning because I like to see the back and forth of people competing and these ideas and competing against one another. But then it goes to the next level when you actually really start to understand debate and understand the rules of debate and understand logical fallacies and understand that debate is a game of chess in a way. But if you have a chessboard, you can't move the pawn diagonally, right? There are rules to the game. And this is where logical fallacies come into play. And this is where all of the rules of discourse and debate come in. So if somebody makes a logical fallacy and you're trained to be able to pick that up, then you can understand that they're using bad logic, right? So if somebody's arguing in bad faith, to the untrained ear, it might sound like they're winning the debate, but to the trained ear, you can understand that they're not playing by the rules, and that's bad logic. So then understanding that further and further and really analyzing debates like I do on my channel, I started to really be able to grasp the rules of the game. And then I would watch the old Christian debates that I would watch back in the day when I was like, oh, Christopher Hitchens is killing these guys. He's got this sort of English charm and wit. But now I look at them and I think to myself, he's not making very good arguments at all. He's not making good arguments. And I watch Sam Harris versus William Lane Craig, and William Lane Craig absolutely takes him to school. Whereas me, 10 years ago, I might have seen that and thought that Sam Harris was winning. But you understand the rules of the game, and then you realize that it's actually not logical what they're saying because Sam Harris is trying to create this moral landscape based on atheism. And that's an untenable worldview because if you don't believe that there's anything objective, if you believe that we're just matter in motion and that we're just neurons firing into each other and that we don't have free will, then you actually can't make moral claims. You can't make ought claims. So William Lane Craig disposed of Sam Harris very easily. And so I actually came to the Christian faith through reason and through logic, right? It wasn't any sort of divine moment. There wasn't any spark there. There wasn't any sort of internal revelation. It was purely through logic and through understanding the rules of the game and then understanding the laws of logic and realizing that the Christians actually have a very, very coherent worldview. So that was the main part about how I came to the faith. And then you start to sort of look back. I start to look back at my life and I start to look at the different competing worldviews and realize that the liberal, hedonistic, degenerate worldview only leads you to misery. And it only leads you to solipsism. And, there is no other path really, because if everything that you're doing in life is just to feed this eternal void within you and to just, then that's where you'll be trapped, right? But if you live a life where you think about the future and you think about your children and their children and try and make the world a better place and you take the traditions from the past and you try and implement that into your life to make a better future, then you actually can just expand endlessly outwards with your influence and it can be a positive sphere of influence. So there's lots of logical puzzles that I've put together and everything has just completely and utterly solidified in my mind that the Christian worldview is really the only worldview and absolutely the best worldview, and because it's coherent, and every day that gets stronger and stronger as I delve more into the game of logic and life, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, kind of the apologetics route and the learning things from a reasonable and logical standpoint, I think is what ultimately kind of turned me back onto the faith and got me, I would say on the right path just from being an individual who, again, grew up Catholic, going to Catholic schools, but like you said, like just kind of going through the motions and just like, okay, this is a Sunday routine for for us to go to mass. It wasn't something that actually like ultimately like changed my way of living, right? Which is what true faith actually does. But and then I think also too, like as I've what's really cemented it for me, and and something I think is really important for everybody in the culture to know is like, and I don't think we talk about this enough, in that it the fruit that it bears, and I say like when I say that I mean like the living out of the faith, like actually truly does really work, and it really does produce stronger, more stable individuals, societies, civilizations. And like when you see that, it's like
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
when we implement these values, like look at what happens to, again, individuals and societies that practice these things, right? And it's funny that you mentioned like a Sam Harris and his moral landscape and a lot of these atheists. It's like they want to take the cream off the top of what Christianity has produced from a societal standpoint and say like, oh, we're going to take these good things and then apply them.
Exactly.
But when you
They want the fruit
uproot,
from the tree. They want fruit from the
yep,
tree, but they disregard the roots.
you
Yep.
have these people who practice these certain values. They have marriages that are successful. They have families that are successful. They have lives that protect them from the different storms of life, whether that be like mental or physical suffering that a lot of people are going through. And it's like, no, we're not just talking about a change in your Sunday routine. Like we're talking about a way of life that actually produces in you those things you are looking for to keep you stable and sane in this crazy world where you are inevitably going to experience these things.
Yeah, and we see that the world is going into a place of insanity in many
Hmm.
ways, and I do think that the sort of liberal worldview produces that because it's just chaos. There's no
Yeah.
order to the worldview, and there's no tradition. And tradition is so important because tradition is what has carried our civilizations through thousands and thousands of years. And they completely disregard tradition. Not only disregard it, but they seek to deconstruct it, right? So when you do that, then that is inevitably going to cause unbelievable chaos. You look at the postmodernists; they believe that there's no universal truth, and that all they believe that there's no universal truth, and that everything that we consider to be objective or to be universal needs to be deconstructed. And look at the art that they produce. I mean, just look at the art that they produce. It's just complete chaos. It's the uglification of absolutely everything. And this is why I take quite a different stance to a lot of the Christians that you see on YouTube and everything, because I actually don't mind destroying those worldviews. Because if somebody had have really got me in a corner when I was younger and destroyed my worldview, I think that I would have come around to it much easier, because I do think that people are quite susceptible to logic and to really good arguments and strong arguments. And this is why I appreciate a guy like Andrew Wilson, because he's so unfiltered. And I think that as much as we need different perspectives and different views, we do need those people who are going to go in and just be the frontline warriors to just crash through crash through the barricades, if you know
Hmm.
what I mean.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of people out there who sort of go with the cultural hegemony, and they go pretty much unchallenged. But if they hear somebody who is really just attacking those worldviews and breaking them down in a logical way, but also in an aggressive way, I think that young men in particular are going to respond quite well to that, because it's that sort of discipline that they're seeking, rather than this really soft touch approach, which won't really change people's minds. I think it'll change some people's minds, but I think you also need the hardcore discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Andrew Wilson in that regard. And I know that the situation, I guess you can say, with Andrew Wilson, Michael Knowles, Pearl Davis, Nala Ray, and that whole situation, that's kind of come on. I mean, Andrew Wilson has went at her hard, right? And he's kind of been going at Michael Knowles pretty hard. And it seems like, if I'm kind of gathering this correctly, is he's Michael Knowles, he's criticizing Michael Knowles for kind of giving her this platform to prop her up. And it seems to me like Andrew Wilson, he doesn't have an issue with, you know, Nala Ray not doing OnlyFans anymore. I think we can all agree that that's a good thing, right?
Hmm.
That she's not doing OnlyFans. However, it seems to me what Andrew Wilson's problem is that now she's become this Christian influencer who's leading people astray, I guess you can say, with the theology that she's using to describe Christianity.
Yeah, it is a little bit of that. That is one element of it. But I think that the real problem there is that she came on the podcasts before and she would openly say everything that I say is a lie because the way that I get attention, the way that I get money, whatever, is by lying to people. And she was very open and brazen about that. And she said she had loved making men cheat, and everything that she said on these podcasts was a lie. So if you say that, if you say to me everything that I say is a lie, and then the next thing you say to me is, "Oh, I'm a Christian now," I'm going to have my reservations about that. And so I'm going to say, okay, I want to give you 6 months. I want to give you a year, something like that. Go away, work on yourself for a little while, and then really show that you're serious about this, because I'm not going to take you at face value because you've told me that everything you say is a lie. Mm-hmm. And that was on record with her. She's somebody who's openly talked about that and said that. And nobody has a problem with her wanting to be a Christian. Nobody has a problem with her stopping OnlyFans. But the problem is that she had openly said that sort of stuff about the way that she just lies about everything. And then the Daily Wire had platformed her as if she was the sort of face of modern Christianity, of the face of OnlyFans to Christianity arc. Whereas I don't think it's really just like a flick of the switch like that. You have to go away for a little while and actually sort of, learn, especially if you want to be telling people who have been Christians for a very long time about what they should think and how they should act and what the theology is. Just humble yourself for a little while and just work on that, and then eventually, you can say that you can say what you want after a while. But if you go straight from this to this, and then you're on the Daily Wire and you're talking about it, etc., and then you've still got your OnlyFans up, by the way, because she still had it up for months after that, and she put, when she went on one of the interviews, she then had it as a free thing, and then she introduced another paywall, which means that she'd been filtering people and then making them pay again. That's also a problem. And then when she's doing these like cooking videos, these trad wife cooking videos, where she's like overly sexualizing everything, obviously. I don't know if you've seen these, but she's sort of getting the dough roller and, doing some very suspicious hand movements with a dough roller and licking and doing the same sort of faces that she used to do in her OnlyFans days. It's really suggestive. And the problem is that, you can support somebody on their journey as much as possible and try and, and you can be happy for that, but you also don't want to be taken for a fool, right? And there's a level of discernment that you have to ensure that you're not just taken for a fool and taken for a ride. Mm-hmm. And I think that they've got a bit of a problem with that. Some of the Protestant churches out there are just willing to just, baptize someone as soon as they walk in the door and just accept them fully as soon as they walk in the door, without there being any process without there being a process at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, me as a Catholic, you can't enter into the Catholic Church without going through, RCIA, which is, Catholic education. And then everybody's baptized coming into the church on a certain date, which is always at Easter, right? So but there's always things you have to go through before you can just say like, hey, I'm a Christian, or hey, like I'm saved, right? Like that's not, I agree with you. But yeah, that's interesting. And I guess here's where, when all this kind of first started happening, I guess I was somewhat critical of Pearl Davis, and I've since talked to Pearl Davis. She had me on her channel, and we kind of went back and forth about this a little bit. I'm not necessarily willing to die on the Nala Ray Hill. I thought that the way Pearl interpreted the parable of the prodigal son was incorrect. But, I think when it comes down to it, like we as Christians, like we believe that everybody, all of us have some type of sinful past that we need to turn around from. Right. So I don't think that necessarily that doesn't make you a bad Christian necessarily. And I've been, I guess you can say critical of Pearl Davis for some of the things that she said with regard to that, because it seems like she can almost be too harsh on people with sinful past, and then those people then come out, talk about that sinful past, and then try to prevent others from doing it. I think that we wouldn't want people who are who have been perfect for their whole lives, which is nobody. If anybody's been perfect for their whole lives and they're out there trying to convert and out there talking, we would have nobody. We'd have nobody talking, because we're all sinners.
Yep.
But I mean,
completely agree.
even you said like you had a sinful past that again you're not proud of. I mean, you lived in a certain way that was obviously not Christian. But I mean, do you think that it's important for I mean, you would be in a situation now with what you've done where you could absolutely help other men who are in that type of situation. I mean, I know like me personally, like I don't really relate to the guys um, who I guess like never doubted God or didn't have some type of like sinful past or didn't have these types of struggles they never talk about. Like, to me, like that's not real. Like I actually get more from those guys who have overcome like the hardship, adversity, like sinfulness that they had in their past, right? And I think there's truth in that for women too, right? So, and I asked Pearl, I was like, well, do you think any woman with like this type of like sinful past, like they should just never talk? And she said they should never talk. She said I would rather hear from somebody who never did OnlyFans. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. I mean, I think there's obviously a time frame from where you have to go through some stuff and get yourself in order before you're out. That's a Jordan Peterson concept. Get yourself in order before you're out there trying to change the world, of course. But I think personal testimony can be an important thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, with me, for example, I mean, I haven't been baptized since, and I haven't entered a certain denomination, and I haven't got any sort of ministry. And if I did, that would be a very, very long way down the road. The way that I like to talk about it is sort of from the more logical standpoint and take a more Christian, more sort of conservative, traditionalist approach to what I do. I'll pretty rarely invoke Christianity and invoke passages of the Bible, for example. It's pretty rare for me, although I will allude to it. But I have had a lot of people who have messaged me saying that they've sort of come back to Christianity or explored Christianity more through watching my content. And I'm happy to do that, but it also does make me very self-conscious because it's a massive, massive burden of responsibility if people are going to be looking at you in that regard. And I'm a complete layman, right? I'm not educated about this sort of thing. And there are so many people who you can go to that are way, way better than me that will tell you about the Christian faith because I'm going to just slip into heresy because I'm just not educated enough. So from the logical worldview, I think that I can come up with very good arguments for why God exists, for example, and some good arguments for why Christianity is a more logical worldview. However, I'm not going to be preaching to people and I'm not going to be trying to minister to people because it's just not my place. And maybe one day, if I really get my theology down and my apologetics down, and if I have a personal priest or a pastor who is, who I have that really personal relationship with, and they want me to do that, and they feel like there's a calling, then maybe somewhere down the line, I might do something like that. But for now, it's more just going to be about exploring things from the logical point of view and talking about that on my channel. But I completely agree with you that I absolutely relate to the guys who have had a past of some sort. And it does make things a whole lot more relatable because, if there's somebody out there who's just perfect, then it's just I can't sort of relate with that person at all. But in terms of the women and like OnlyFans and everything, there is, I do think, a slight problem with the fact that you do get people who deceive, unfortunately, and who aren't actually authentic and don't actually necessarily believe it. However, if you are somebody who does OnlyFans until you're sort of in your mid to late 20s, and then there's something happens where the guys are now looking at the younger girls and they don't really want to know from you anymore, and perhaps you've had your time and you're now looking at settling down because you've done all of that sort of thing. Unfortunately, within a lot of churches, there is this sort of arc that is happening where women are coming to the church and saying, oh, well, I want to find a Christian guy because the Christian guys will be providing for me and they will pay my bills and they'll give me this sort of security that I now want now that I'm done with all of this sort of thing. So I think that's something that you do have to be a little bit careful of because as much as, like you say, everybody does have a yearning for God in their heart, I do believe that. Sometimes it can be on false pretenses that they'll come into these churches and it can corrupt a community and it can corrupt the church. And if that's something that we just take at face value rather than making people earn their stripes, then I think that can be a big problem. Like with me, for example, like I've got years and years and years of studying and practice to do before I can ever really even call myself a proper Christian. I can say that I'm somebody of the Christian faith. However, to call myself a Christian, I think that I've just got so much personal work and development to do before I can ever really get to that place where I can speak to people on that level. So I just do think that there is a certain amount that people have to do to sort of endear themselves and prove themselves.
Yeah, I agree with you in that. Like, it's we have to remain. I mean, I'm of the opinion where we have to remain skeptical of just about everything that comes into our conscious awareness nowadays, right? But like, it's not necessarily virtuous for a woman who has been on OnlyFans when her market starts to decrease just because of her age or whatever. Like, is she now changing her life? Would she have changed her life had her market not started to decrease? I mean, I think that that's obviously a fair question, right? And I think that it's not necessarily there's not necessarily virtue in stopping doing it because you're not able to make the money or get the attention that you were getting previously, right? So absolutely, I think you should totally definitely be.
And it is a funnel for attention as well, unfortunately. I've been on the Whatever podcast many times when you've got these girls who are still OnlyFans girls, and they're in that lifestyle still, and they'll have a cross on, and they'll say, "Yeah, I'm a Christian, and I'm this and that," and a lot of them will say, "I'm a virgin," and they'll just lie blatantly through their teeth in order to try and get attention from men, because there's going to be men out there, unfortunately, and I think there might be a lot of them who are Christians or who are whatever, who will be looking at these girls and who will go and subscribe to their OnlyFans, and they're being deceived by that. And I think that some of these women have sort of used this as a marketing strategy. So if you take those, if you take Nala, for example, and you just accept it at face value, then why can't we just accept all of these girls that I've met on the podcast who just got their boobs out and who got the cross on and still on OnlyFans, but they're Christian because Jesus is like a nice boyfriend who would love me doing this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It happens all the time, so there just has to be some sort of level of discernment there. And look at this preacher Marianne Abedou, the one who was lecturing Trump. Mm-hmm. She's a subversive. She is. That's a satanic subversive individual who's now it's been proven that she took 54 million from USAID to be promoting all these things, she promotes abortion and BLM and transgenderism, and that's a subversive. So as much as we do want everybody to find the truth, there are going to be people out there who are just dishonest and who are subversives, and if we just take everybody at face value, then it's going to be corrupting.
Yeah. The Jesus approves of me doing OnlyFans was a pretty mind-boggling statement for me to hear watching. I don't know if it was you or maybe it was Andrew Wilson or it was somebody that I was watching on the Whatever podcast where that statement came across. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah. That's deception and it's deceiving a lot of people. And it doesn't help that there's so many Christian men that are the market for these types of women.
Exactly, because men, we're susceptible to pleasures of the flesh, unfortunately, and it's something that we have to be fighting every single day. If you're a married Christian man, I mean, I'd probably recommend that you stay off Instagram as much as possible, because that's like a gateway these days. Yeah. You see so much like softcore pornographic material on there that it can be a gateway to going and watching porn, and it can, if you're putting yourself in certain social situations, you're going to be around other females, and it might sort of bring up some sort of lustful desires in you. So it's a battle every single day as a man to try and keep that at bay, because unfortunately it's something we have in our fallen nature. So
yeah, it is a battle. And I like what you said about Instagram. I mean, as soon as you open that search or explore page on Instagram, it's like it gets thrown in front of you. If they know you're a male, they're going to put it in front of you. The same is true with TikTok. I mean, if you as soon as I click that homepage link, it could just be like real quick, but boom, something pops up, right? And it is absolutely a battle. I mean, that's one of the things that I've done. I mean, it's because I'll create, so I put stuff on these platforms, but I try to keep everything on my computer. And when I'm uploading, I'm only on like those upload tabs or the create tab or whatever it is. And I try to stay off those search pages and that homepage. And that's been helpful.
Yeah, you got to do it, man.
Yeah. But to get back to a little bit of the Andrew Wilson thing. So what is your take on kind of I know it's been the back and forth. I've seen Andrew Wilson, calling him out on X But what is your take between kind of the Michael Knowles and Andrew Wilson approach when it comes to these things?
Oh, I love them both. I think that they're both fantastic.
Me too.
I'm
I
a,
really like them both,
yeah,
so it's hard for
yeah,
me to like. I don't want to like take a
yeah.
side in either of them, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been covering Michael for years. I love the fact that he's smooth and he's just like slick and
yeah,
he's personable and he's a gentleman. And I think we
hmm
need that approach so much because, I look at that and I think that that's a that's a guy who I like sort of is a role model for me. I
hmm
like the way he dresses and the way he carries himself and the way that he articulates his point and he can do it in a way that's very, very classy while he's saying something controversial, very
yeah,
controversial.
yeah. He
But
can.
he can do it in a way that sort of lulls people. So he's got a real talent like that. So I'm a massive Michael Knowles fan, and I've covered him
hmm
many times. And I call him Smooth Mickey on my channel, which is a bit of a running joke with my community now. So you've got that, but then you've got Andrew Wilson, who's like a zealot, and he calls himself a zealot. So he's like a bulldozer, he'll just
Yeah,
wants to steam through it.
yeah.
And I think that they're both really, really good approaches,
hmm
and I like them both. However, Michael Knowles is not independent. He works for the Daily Wire, and the Daily Wire, unfortunately, have limitations on who they're going to speak to and who they're going to give the limelight to. So they're happy to get Nala on, but then they wouldn't want to do a debate with because they'd be the ones blocking it. I think Michael Knowles would be up for the debate, but it'd be the Daily Wire who's blocking it. And I know this from having sort of interacted with them in the past that they have this little bureaucracy that happens, and they're very cautious about who their stars will go and talk to.
hmm
And I don't think that they like a guy like Andrew Wilson, and I don't think they want anything to do with him because uh, unfortunately for Andrew, they don't like the fact that he is able to say what he says unapologetically and to be a little bit rough around the edges and to be smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer while he does it because
hmm
that's not the way it's meant to be, right? It's meant to be that we're all just sort of these nice sort of conservatives with nice suits on and
hmm
that's the way that they've done it. And they don't like the fact that he's been able to amass a lot of this following through just being unapologetically brutal and truthful
hmm
about what he believes. And I don't think that they want that because what he's going to do is he's going to call out the more liberal parts of their worldviews, all of the parts where they've acquiesced to the culture. Because if he sits down across from a guy like, not so much Michael Knowles, because Michael Knowles actually acquiesces to the culture a lot less than the others, but a guy like Ben Shapiro, for example, and these people, I don't think that would be a very good thing for them, especially not different organization, but a guy like Charlie Kirk. I like Charlie Kirk as well. Covered him many times. I think he does a lot of great things. But if Andrew sat across from Charlie Kirk, it would not be a good night for Charlie, unfortunately, because Charlie Kirk's acquiesced a lot with things like gay marriage and having transgenders at the TPUSA summits. A lot of feminism going on there as well. So
mm
this is the way that the big conservative ink, like the Daily Wire and TPUSA have gone about things. Is that they've sort of made the tent very big, right? And they've made their audience as big as possible, which is very good financially, and it also can be very good for the culture because people who are sort of soft left can now be sort of centrist, sort of soft right. But Andrew Wilson is no soft right; he's a far right. He's a hard right,
right, right.
like, in the best way. So he just doesn't put up with any of that sort of nonsense, and he's happy to have his community. It's never going to be as big as TPUSA, for example, but he believes what he believes, and actually, if you look at the authentic Christian worldview, they're not going to. He's actually right about a lot of these things, unfortunately, for those guys.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a purity in kind of being able to remain independent though. Like you have like kind of these, like you mentioned, like big conservative ink with like TPUSA and Daily Wire. It's like, as much as I like this, I mean, I've been a Daily Wire member for a long, long time. Like I still like a lot of those guys. I learn from a lot of those guys. Like you mentioned, you learn from Michael Knowles. I do the same. I mean, say what you want about Ben Shapiro. Like in general, I feel like Ben Shapiro as a political commentator is still one of the best guys that I can listen to. I learn a lot from him, and I generally do appreciate his perspective. But there is a level of of purity that does come from remaining independent. And I think you see that a lot, especially with Candace Owens, and now that she's been independent and she's talking about the things that she's talking about. But like, yeah, it's funny that you say that. I mean, again, Daily Wire they have a certain message and they're gonna control what they want to control as far as the narrative goes, and that's fine. They're a business; they have the right to do that. And if Candace obviously did things outside the box and touched on things they didn't want her obviously to touch on. But see, like, I don't know, like I'm in a spot where I really enjoy hearing from all of them, because I feel like everybody and all of their perspectives like kind of get at the truth a little bit. And I think Candace keeps my skepticism radar very, very strong. And I think that that's very important, right? It's especially important in this day and age when it's hard to determine and discern what the truth is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. I mean, these guys, they've done incredible things for the culture in terms of Daily Wire and TP USA. I mean, you just look at the body of work that they've got. They've influenced so many people, and it's fantastic. So to take one side or the other in the sense that I'm with this guy, so this guy's bad, that's just silly. I mean, even Ben Shapiro, if I ever criticize him on my channel, it's always with a pinch of, but you know, he's been very, very good for the culture. Like, he's done some amazing things, and you know, I'm positive about Ben Shapiro. I don't agree with him about a few things, just like I don't really agree with Charlie Kirk about a few things. But you know, to say that they're negative for the culture when you look at the sort of liberal hegemony of the West is absurd. So it does get a little bit tribal on the right sometimes, but I think I like to try and balance it on my channel. I'll still cover these guys, you know, even if there's a feud, and I do take the side of Andrew Wilson more in this regard in terms of the whole Nala situation. I do think that the Daily Wire should just have that debate if they want to have it out between Andrew and Michael, and I do think that Michael would be down for that because he doesn't shy away from this sort of thing. But yeah, just have the debate. Don't gatekeep. That's what I'd say in this regard. But I also do really appreciate those guys. So I don't think that it's a contradictory worldview to have that.
Yeah, it seems as though, I mean, there's definitely a tribalism within the conservative side of things. There's also tribalism within kind of the Christian side of things too. I mean, and as I've kind of, you know, got myself into this world, like what I'm trying to do is, I really appreciate what you said as being like a true layman. It's like there are things that I know and that I can talk about, whether that be, you know, just kind of some common sense politics, like small business, entrepreneurship, you know, health, like those types of things. Like I'm much more of an expert on than I am on, you know, Christian theology. Like I'm certainly not perfect in that regard. Like I like to look at Christianity just as the best way to live, and I'm learning a ton myself, but I hesitate to really say that I'm some type of like Christian influencer, because like Christianity has impacted my life for sure. And there's Christian themes that run through everything that I produce, but there are people out there that just know way more than I do about theology and philosophy. Like I'm much more of just like I'm a lay, common sense, you know, small business type of guy. And the thing is that I think there are a lot of other people that relate to that as well. And I can hear these ideas from these people who are really smart, you know, like a lot of people that we've mentioned, and I can kind of like distill it down to like, okay, like how do I apply this to my real life? And I think that can be really helpful for people, you know, and then just kind of like, you know, searching through the political world and figuring out like, hey, like this is a lie. This is clearly untrue. This is what they're trying to do to manipulate you. But it's really just all, you know, common sense type of stuff. So no, I appreciate you saying that. But again, like I don't want to be like categorized in some way as like this type of person or that type of person or any of that, because I mean, like you said, like I really learn from and enjoy a lot of these different perspectives. And I don't want to get put in a box, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, man. Couldn't agree more. I think if you put yourself into a tribal box, whether that be, you know, the sort of alt-right or the this right or that right, you're gonna close yourself off from good perspectives and information. And even the normie centrists I enjoy listening to the libertarians. I love listening to Dave Smith. I listen to him all the time. I listen to guys like Chris Williamson all the time. You know, there's a lot of people who would not share my worldview at all, really, who I am more than happy to listen to, because they bring a lot of value in other regards. And that's the beauty of learning. It's the beauty of sort of going on this sort of journey yourself, is that you can eventually start to be discerning enough to pick what you really like and what you don't like so much, and not judge people just purely based on the fact that they don't share this one. Like RFK, for example, total radical on abortion, like believes in no restrictions on abortion. I still like the guy because he's really great with Big Pharma and litigating against Big Pharma. Tulsi Gabbard, liberal. She's liberal as they come, like feminist, believes in abortion, climate change, all of this sort of thing. But I think that she'd be a good director of CIA because I do believe that she's somebody who's got a very good head on her shoulders when it comes to intelligence and when it comes to being anti-war, for example. So you gotta everyone plays their role.
Yeah, no, and you're 100% right. And to me, it's kind of tiresome to be like, oh, I don't support like a Mike Pence take on RFK Jr., who's like, absolutely not. We can't associate ourselves at all with this guy because of his stance on abortion. So that therefore, because he's not as pro-life as I want him to be, now he can't go in and be this director of HHS. And I'm just like, no, like I'm radical pro-life, man, but like I want RFK Jr. in that role. Like that Make America Healthy Again movement, and combining that with the Trump movement was that was a huge win as far as this movement goes. And again, as someone who takes, health is something that's very important to me, and it's very important to my wife, and how we handle our kids, and like we're very conscious of those things. So to have RFK Jr. like standing up for all these things, finally, like it gave a voice to a lot of people who have been crying out for a long time from a health standpoint and from a looking at big pharma and just the whole medical industry in general. Like that is such a huge and important aspect of this movement. And just to put him in a box just because he's not as pro-life as you want him to be, I just think is a huge mistake. And it's just like tiring. It's like, no, like just be like, another example is like, oh, because he's not Catholic means I can't listen to anything that he says. And it's just like, nah, like I'm not interested in being that way. And I truly believe that's tyrannical. That's a suppression ultimately of what free speech is designed to be, which is, again, like, even as much as I love the Catholic Church, like obviously it can devolve into a type of authoritarian tyranny when it closes itself off from, you can say, that mechanism of free speech. Like you just saw it with the USCCB, the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, coming out and condemning Donald Trump's immigration policy and saying that it was the official stance of the Catholic Church. It's like, no, that's not the case. And then you actually had a lot of other bishops that came through. But can you imagine if there was that authoritarian tyranny that just says like, no, this is how it is, and there wasn't anybody to speak out against it? It's like, yeah, that's like, to me, again, it's just another form of tyranny. And that's what we have to just constantly battle and oppose, whether it be the church, whether it be politics, or whether it be kind of the tribalism that exists within kind of these certain segments that we're talking about.
Yeah, you don't want human beings having that level of power. What you want, I think, that even if you do I believe that I've got a very coherent worldview, right? But I would never want myself to have unmitigated power because I'm just a man. I'm just a human being, and it wouldn't go very well, right? So what you want to have is the broader tapestry of different ideas that can merge together in a way where we can render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. Mm-hmm. You never want one person to have all of the power, because as good as people can get, nobody is ever going to be that good. Nobody's ever going to be as good as Jesus Christ,
Yeah, I really, and that kind of gets back to Jordan Peterson a little bit. I mean, with regard to like what the truth is like, as soon as you claim some exclusive rights on the truth, like you've lost the truth, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like that again, that's why I appreciate the perspective of kind of left and right, because I feel like you almost need both. Like, I mean, you need that conflict, you need that debate between both sides to ensure that we remain on that path, which is kind of towards that truth. But as soon as one side says like, no, this is it, and this is how like kind of everybody has to be, that's when tyranny happens. And I would even venture to say like that's the case too with Christianity. And we've seen that time and time again throughout history, where like maybe the church takes some type of tyrannical stance where it puts them in error, and adjustments need to be made, right? Like reform needs to be made. That's something that has been a constant need. It's a constant need of anything human, right? Because we can deceive ourselves, right? That's why I feel like that constant like skepticism muscle is just always important to have.
Yeah. I kind of look at the left-right dialectic as more of the like what we'd see as far right these days. I think that that's the normal sort of right, or that's the normal conservative traditionalist way, like the Andrew Wilson type of worldview. And I see the left as like the soft left, Charlie Kirk, even the libertarians, the classical liberals. I view that as the left in a way. Not Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk would probably be more sort of center right. But the classical liberals, guys like Stephen Fry and Christopher Hitchens and guys like this, that's what I kind of see as the left. But then we've sort of moved our culture these days to where those guys are seen as centrists, and then the sort of the gender ideologues and everything, they're seen as the left. Whereas I see that as a radical fringe of society where that ideology is completely kind of useless in the broader spectrum of things. It doesn't help anybody having this sort of postmodernist deconstructionist ideology, and that should be relegated to the fringes. However, I do look at the libertarians and classical liberals as often with a lot of value to bring to the conversation, and who can sort of inject a little bit of chaos into the order, just a sort of sprinkle of chaos into the order, and they've got that sort of more artistic flair. I think that a lot of people are more artistic and a little bit more liberal in their orientation. So that's when you get cool creative projects. Like I've always really loved guys. Like I always loved Christopher. I still do love like a guy like Christopher Hitchens because he's just so clever and witty, and he used to go around the world and get his boots on the ground in all of these different places and form this he had this sort of worldview where he was just so in tune with the world and so practical about things. And it's kind of hard to explain, but when you read his books and you listen to him speak about things that aren't atheism, it's so brilliant to listen to. And I've always liked guys like Hunter S. Thompson. You know Hunter S. Thompson?
No.
He wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he started what's called gonzo journalism, where he used to go around and he joined the Hells Angels for a year, and he used to do all of these drugs and go on these road trips, and that's how Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas came about. But these sort of rogue gonzo figures who just push the boundaries all of the time, they're not considered like the Christian right, but these guys bring a lot of value, I think, because they have this sort of practical understanding of the world that you can't really get from having a white picket fence type life. So all kinds of worldviews are very important in that regard, and it brings a lot of creativity and flair and excitement to the world. But yeah, looking at the left-right dialectic, I don't really see that the modern day left as a useful part of that, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's actually a really good clarification. I mean, there's got to be some type of truth seeking on both sides. And when it comes to like what kind of the modern day left and their extreme ideologies come through, it's like you mentioned earlier, like the need for condemning something that's just abjectly false and evil. And like I'm in agreement with you in that ideology just needs to be stomped out, eliminated, because it's proven false, and that's just where we need to leave it. I totally agree with you in that. And I like that clarification that you made from like that kind of the left and the right. And it's a truth seeking, like based on your past experience and personality. And yes, there are some kind of more creative types. There are also what you would call like the more traditional conservatives, who are kind of the more like, I don't know, like kind of the straight A, did really well in school, had everything done, kind of had, straight laced type of guys. Whereas like, I would probably put myself on the other side of that. It's like, no, I wasn't listening to anybody. I wouldn't say that I have a college education, I have a college degree, but I wouldn't call myself some type of like intellectual or educated type of person, right? Like I kind of just like, kind of learned everything my own way and did my own thing and was an athlete, whatever. Learned about, the importance of hard work and all that good stuff. It was more of like a kind of a blue collar upbringing type of thing, middle class blue collar. But like, yeah, I mean, you need both perspective for sure. And that's what kind of keeps us in truth, and kind of that back and forth between those two sides 100%. But the current modern left and what they have to offer is not helpful at all. It's regressive. It brings us backwards for sure.
Yeah. Terribly damaging as well. It's terribly damaging to the
Yep.
family unit and to children and to our modern discourse. And we can see that we're not replacing ourselves. And if that were to reign supreme, if there was just that, we would go out of existence, and we would never have any meaning in life, and we would never have anything to strive towards, because we'd be striving towards progressivism. And what is progressivism? Progressivism is what is currently cool, I guess. It's the current thing. It's whatever's at this for the next 5 minutes, whatever is considered like a virtue signal. But if you look at tradition is, like I said, what sustained us. And and there's a really good quote from a book that I read recently that was saying that it's hard that conservatism is normally found in the country because it's hard to separate people from the God above their head and their father buried beneath them. And there's something to that. It's that sort of that traditional worldview that you really take into consideration your ancestors and those who have gone before you, and you think about that with meaning, not just me right here, right now, and what's happening at this moment. You're thinking about your ancestors before you and then your ancestors ahead of you. And if you think about it, that encapsulates in that one sort of frame of mind how to have a really successful and prosperous world. It's about sacrifice, and it's about thinking about others that have gone before and will go after you. So progressivism doesn't do that. Progressivism just means like what feels nice right now.
Right.
So it doesn't help us. We won't replace our population if we just did that.
Right. Well, I think it's being found out though, and kind of the way that you described like what ultimately won you over about Christianity, and that you were able to, your eyes were open to in debate into what was a more logical argument. Right. When your eyes were open to that allowed you to kind of see what the truth was. To be honest with you, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I think we're in a moment right now where kind of this postmodernism and this progressive ideology is just being found out. Like, and I think that people are just seeing it, like their eyes have been opened to like, oh, this is what this produces. And like, we go back and we look at kind of these traditional Christian values, and it's like, oh, like, look at what that produces. And it's kind of like, yeah, I think I want that. I think I want that option. Right. So it's kind of just like a common sense, like realization that I think has really been put on the forefront of people's minds in our modern day.
I think a lot of people look at the fruits of Christianity and then the fruits of modern day liberalism, and there's just such a stark contrast. Like if you were to put them next to each other, you look at art, for example, look at the wonderful, beautiful art that Christian Europe and the middle, like those sorts of times had produced compared to the sort of slop that we see at the moment.
Yeah.
Look at the architecture. When you actually care about how beautiful your city is and what people are seeing and how inspired people are when they walk around your city, as opposed to this sort of like the commie blocks that we see right now, and this really sort of deathly, uninspiring, just like degrading architecture that we see at the moment. You look at people. When people dress nicely and present themselves well and have their family with them and are courteous and polite, as opposed to these sort of septum-piercing people that we see at the moment with the blue hair and trying to uglify themselves and trying to make themselves as ugly as possible to try and not conform with like gender norms or beauty norms. Well, all of this rejection of objective beauty and all of this rejection of goodness and of decency, it's actually, when you look at it, it's actually like really degrading, and it actually makes you a little bit black-pilled, and it makes you feel like life is a little bit worse. But when you look at the beauty that's been produced by societies, it makes you think that what life is worth living, and that there is something to strive towards, and it speaks to us, and it, we yearn for that sort of thing. So you look at the fruits of it, and it's just night and day.
It's proof. Ultimately, I believe it's strong proof of, it's like when you're aligned properly, which I would say would be properly aligned with God, the fruit that produces is, again, that type of stable, peaceful, fruitful life that all of us are looking for. And that's the case from, across all aspects of your life, whether it be your relationships, your work, your family, like all of it. And then it goes upward to your community and your state and your nation. It's like when it's properly aligned, this is the fruit that it bears. And it's the misalignment that we see that, I mean, you touched on it well. It's ugly. Like, and it's, the most desirable places to go to in this world are those places where the buildings were built or the art was created for God. And those individuals and those societies, you'd argue, were aligned properly. That's what they were producing this stuff for, to give glory to God. And look at what it created, like look at what it produced. And I think when it comes down to it, like that's the question that I think everybody needs to be asking themselves these days. It's like, well, this is this way of life. This is what this produces. And then this is what this way of life produces. Take your pick.
Yeah, that's like
You
that
know?
meme. That meme these days, it's like choose your path, modern man.
Yeah.
And it's got like Joe Rogan or like Ethan Klein.
Yeah, some form
Yeah.
of masculinity that the left is trying to force upon us. Maybe it was Doug Emhoff or something like that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly right. Exactly.
So, so one of the couple last things that I want to touch on with you, Jake. So, you had mentioned that you and Andrew Wilson are starting a political commentary channel. So, what is that going to be about? What are you guys? How are you guys trying to position yourselves, kind of based on everything that we've talked about today?
Yeah, man. Well, the next 4 years is going to be a very interesting time in the world of politics. I'm sure
Yeah,
you'll agree with that. Trump's going to do a lot of very interesting things, and the world is just going in a place where it's just we don't. We're in the haze at the moment. We don't really know what's next. It's like there's a big reformation happening in the global order. That's the way I see it, and it's a real. It's a really interesting time to be talking about politics. And as a guy who watches Andrew's channel a fair bit, one of the things that I said to him was like, people really want to hear your take on modern events, and they would love to see that. And I've wanted to go for a while now to be able to produce my own content as well, and to be able to actually talk about politics and not have to rely on debates happening and that sort of thing. So just kind of worked out well for us both, and we want to do a political commentary show where we're just basically talking about current events, and it'll be mainly Andrew talking and me preparing the show and sort of getting the show notes going and giving little takes here and there. But it'll probably be like 80% him talking, 20% me talking, because he's obviously got a lot more knowledge than I do. But that's kind of the way I want to do it. I don't really want to. If I had a political commentary show, it'd probably be pretty milk toast because like I said, I'm still a layman, still learning. So for me to be able to pick his brains and for everybody to be able to hear that, and for us to have that back and forth, I think that that'll be a really good show.
yeah, cool. Well, I definitely agree with you in that. I think that the next 4 years are definitely going to be uh, very interesting as far as politics go. But I also think it's a good time to do so, build up that political audience over the next 4 years, because I would hope that this Make America Great Again movement will continue. I expect it to do so, because I think what's really going to happen is that this administration and everybody within it is really going to deliver for the American people, and I think the American people are going to continually see that over the course. And I think that, again, whoever runs in 2028 and then beyond, I think as long as we can continue this and they can keep delivering for the American people, then they will continually be rewarded, I believe, with winning elections. But what worries me is that you have a lot of these social media companies, and we see everything coming out as far as like collusion goes with federal agencies working with media companies and all that good stuff, with all this USAID stuff coming out. But like, it's crazy how, like, I think Candace Owens is a great example. She was remonetized on YouTube like the day before, the day after, like Trump's inauguration, right? It's like you
Oh,
had
I didn't know
those.
that. She's got remonetized. That's good for
She
her.
got remonetized, but like it's kind of like some of the censorship has backed off a little bit. It seems like it seems to be happening, but it concerns me. It's like, are we just going to have this? If they get elected in power, is this just going to flip flop every 4 years? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
I hope that that's not the case. I hope that you know the left comes back closer to reality because
Well,
of what they just learned. But
we gotta make hay while the sun shines, brother. 4 years.
that's right. So long story short, these next 4 years are going to like, build it all up, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Cool. Well, Jake, let everybody know where they can find you. I mean, we mentioned your channel, but what are the
I got a question
specifics
for you before we do that.
Okay.
So for guys who might be watching your channel, tell me, you're married with how many kids?
My wife and I have 5 kids.
5 kids. Good for you,
Yeah.
man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, that's very aspirational for me. Tell me, what are the things that you look for in terms of your wife and in terms of creating that sort of environment? Tell me what I have to be doing to achieve that. What kind of values do I have to be looking at, etc.?
What ultimately won me over, or made it very clear that I wanted to marry my wife, was that she has always encouraged me um, to remain strong in my faith. Like, she's always increased my level of faith in God, and it was actually, I always felt that in order for me to be the type of man that my wife would want to marry, that I needed to continue to build myself up in virtue, in competence, and all of that. So she kind of she had that standard, and I wanted to live up to that standard, in order to get her to want to marry me. And I guess I would just say, like, the fact that she's one of the things I appreciate most about her is that she has those standards for herself, and she never compromised on those standards. And when I say standards, I really mean her faith. That's always been her top priority. She has always and consistently put God first as her highest priority, even over me, right? So I think that she's not willing to compromise on her faith in God, regardless of circumstance, even with her own husband. And that's something that we've kind of determined together, and that, well, not determined together, but that's now both of our top priority, is that no, God is our top priority, and then it's our marriage, and then it's our kids. But I would say what ultimately made my wife special to me was that was her uncompromising faith, and that standard that created her having a standard for what she was looking for in a husband and what she wanted for her life and a family, that I think has just, again, we talk about what works, and we talk about, that value system that produces the life that we ultimately want. And as far as like her having that as her priority, like, I'm seeing that now as probably the most important thing when it comes to finding a spouse. Like, you have to find a woman who has God as her top priority, in my opinion, because then everything else under that takes care of itself. But like, a woman who's not willing to compromise on God, man, like, there's a lot of talk, like, there's, especially with marriages failing, women are, the main initiators of divorce. When men make money, women become more, I guess you can say, inclined or tempted or whatever to leave them, take their money, take their kids. Like, that's just so far from a worry for me, because it's like, when it comes down to it, it's like, I mean, me and my wife, like, it's like I know that she'd rather die than betray God and betray me and betray our kids. And when I was going back and forth with Pearl Davis about this, like, somebody said in the comments, like, oh, this dude lives in a bubble. And it's like, yeah, I do live in a bubble. I live in a God protected bubble that allows my marriage to be successful, is what it comes down to. And it's just like, I don't care what the divorce laws are. I don't care about these different types of things, because it's not what we're after. And I would be lying to say that it would be anything else. So I would just say, like, if that helps you at all, like, that's probably the main thing, or the main priority that I would look for in a wife.
Powerful answer, man. It sounds like she elevates you a lot.
She does. Yeah, she does. And, I use this example from our conversation with Pearl Davis. She's like, well, do you think that, so you think you need your wife for that? You think you need your woman for that? Because what I said is that my wife and kids amplify everything that I do. They make it more meaningful. They make my work more meaningful. The fact that I'm not just doing it for myself, but I'm doing it for them, amplifies it. It makes it way more meaningful. And she's like, well, you wouldn't be able just to have the motivation and do all that on your own. It's like, no, I'd be able to be competent for sure. And I'd be able to make a living. Like, I understand how all of that works, but, it's like it takes you to another level, and it's that level, and it's that type of just like meaning and fulfillment that I'm very fortunate to have every day, that really ultimately, like, I mean, I say it powers me, but again, like, if I didn't have them, of course, I believe in God. I still believe that God made me for a purpose. I would still have responsibility in that regard, but like, I don't know. It's like some type of like amplification that really just like increases the meaning and fulfillment that comes along with it. But absolutely. And I think that I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but one of the things that you see a lot now in our culture, you have a lot of people like on the red pill side of things that say, like, they want a submissive woman. And I'm not, and my wife and I talk about this a lot, and we don't have any real problem with submissiveness. Like, we have more of like a traditional, you would even say like patriarchal family structure, where I'm out working, my wife's home with our kids. She's taking care of and running the home. So we have that structure and we believe in it and we feel like it works. But what my wife is not is she's not some pushover that is just going to be quiet and I can just tell her to do whatever it is that I want to do. Like truthfully, like when it comes to being a leader of the family, I don't believe that a true leader wants people who are just not going to speak up or challenge them or I mean, you look at these great CEOs or these great companies and they had cultures where they had cultures of free speech, right? They had that mechanism of free speech working where every individual felt as though they had the right to challenge or speak up when things were going wrong. And that aspect of my wife, I feel like is very important. And I really do cherish that. She's not some pushover. Like my wife, if she wanted to, could go out and be successful in any type of workplace, but that's not like, but that's, congratulations. Like, and that's what there's like, there's a lot of like women, for example, who look down on motherhood because they're going out and they're, in the workforce and they're doing a great job. It's like, congratulations, but like how this is. It's like it's not that difficult to be successful in the workplace. Like if you have some type of work ethic and you're and you're competent in some way, like you can go out and make money. Like it's like, congratulations. But like to be able to run a home and to have kids and to raise those kids, in my opinion, brings out like a real feminine genius that I think is just really beautiful to see. But then also like having a wife that, that has that has standards and is willing to call you out and to be like kind of an adversary that like makes you better, I think is also very important. I don't operate well when people are just pushovers. I need people to kind of call me out and conflict on things. Like it makes me sharper. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have other men in your life that don't do that. Iron sharpens iron, and that's true. I don't talk to my wife about every single thing going on. Like I don't, devolve all my emotions into my wife. That's not what she's there for. But again, like when it comes down to it, like I know she's gonna, if she has a problem, if she has an issue, she's gonna call me out for it. She's strong and she's not a pushover. And I think that you can you can be that, and you can also be submissive to your husband, who is the leader of your family, as long as, I would say, again, but you have the woman still has to have a standard that the man is I mean, I guess you can say worthy of being the leader of a family. If the husband is not executing on his responsibilities and being the man that God made him to be, then I would say it's fair for the wife to then criticize that husband, or to be like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like you're supposed to be doing this because I'm, taking care of these responsibilities at home. Like, and if you're not going to do that, then biologically speaking, she's going to have a problem with that because she's not being provided and protected for. Right. So I think there are a lot of men also who they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have that submissive wife, but they're also not willing to take on the responsibility and the burden of being the leader of their family. So yeah, man, I don't know. That's a really long answer, but there's a lot there. But when it comes down to it, like because of who my wife is, and I feel like I got really lucky. I mean, I know that there are other men who feel the same way, but those are all of the, I guess you can say, the very meaningful and fulfilling things that having a good wife and having a good marriage and family can do for you.
That's awesome, man. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that, actually.
Thanks. Well, yeah, man. Well, thanks for the question. I mean, Jake, I really enjoyed the conversation, man. I hope we can stay in touch, and as we continue to both grow, we can have more good conversations. Maybe in person at some point here in the near future. But let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so Jake Rattle SNK on Twitter and Instagram, and then Rattlesnake TV on YouTube. Thanks a lot for having me, man. I appreciate it. It was good fun.
Yeah, cool, Jake. Thanks, man. Talk soon.
Of course.